Got 3 old sheets here, and I just looked at them. I said, they're all the same.
I do that on purpose, Greg.
The quiz question.
Okay, let's get started because I don't know how long the meeting's going to go. Last time went a little longer than we had expected. We had so much dialogue and so much Q&A. A couple of brief announcements before we get started, before Joe goes through his survey. One is Dick Bily. You all know, had a birthday Saturday. He was 90.
Wow.
And he's spry as ever, and down in Tampa with, you know who he's with, his employer. Not really. He doesn't work for the Yankees, but you think he did. So he's down there. And then tomorrow there's a momentous birthday that you all should know about. That's Eddie Robinson, who's spoken to our, there we go, who wrote Lucky Me with one of our presenter last month, and Paul Rogers. He'll be 100 tomorrow, and he may be the oldest person who played in a World Series that's still living. He's not the oldest Yankee, I don't think. I think Bobby Brown may have him. No, he's older than Bobby Brown. Bobby's a little bit younger, but that's pretty unique, and that's pretty great.
Today is isn't today Greg Biggio's birthday too?
It is.
Good.
Hey, Bob, what year did that fellow play in the World Series?
1948.
48. Okay.
It was Cleveland, with the Indians.
Oh, there's a topic.
While they were still the Indians. That's a little controversy today. Sure.
Yes, the one of the social media trends is spiders today.
Yeah.
That's old.
Mm-hmm.
Good. It's an old Cleveland name, so it's.
Oh yeah, name them after the worst team that ever played. That would be, it's good. That's.
I'm just reporting the social media news, Greg.
I know you are. I know you are.
I say call them the Cleveland Alexanders. That way you can call them the winning team.
Yeah.
Whoa,
Okay.
there you go. Yeah. No.
Also, Bill Gilbert, they've named the San Marcos or SABR chapter up there after the meeting. I'll get it straight. They're going to have their annual meeting on January 9th. It's being called the Bill Gilbert Annual Meeting. And it'll probably be on Zoom. I'm sure it'll be on Zoom, but one of their speakers is going to be a current ball player who played for the Astros, Tony Kemp. So you may want to tune into that. Just ask for an invitation, and it's going to be an all-day meeting as usual. A number of us have attended those meetings. Some of us have even spoken at that meeting, and they're a lot of fun. And so I'll try to remind you again, but that is something. Okay, Joe has been working real hard on a number of projects. So I'll let Joe take it over right now and talk about the website and his survey.
Okay, well, there's not really much on the website, although it will be changing dramatically after some more news that we care to share today. In fact, a lot of things on the social media universe will probably change today after the news that we will let all of y'all in on. But as far as fixing up the site, I'm doing a lot more with Twitter and Facebook. I've actually been thinking a lot lately about Facebook and Twitter, and I've decided I have, my reasons that I'm going to be spending a lot more time dealing with our social media stuff, really starting the first of the year. I'm going to be, if it's not full-time already, I'm going to disconnect myself from my personal Facebook page and my personal Twitter page. They'll still be up there, but pretty much everything I can think of baseball-wise is going to be focused primarily on our Twitter and Facebook feed. And I'm looking at some other social media sites to add our stuff to, including Instagram. I know the South Carolina chapter, the South Carolina chapter, I forget which one it is. They do a lot of stuff on Instagram. I'm going to put a lot more. That's more picture based. So those are going to be a lot of stuff up there. And I'm going to try to link as much as I can with our own personal site, sabrhouston.org. But that's pretty much it as far as social media stuff. So
How about Parlor?
And I'm going to do a lot of, I'm going to spend probably the next week or so coming up with as many Christmas baseball stories that I can and sharing that on social media and Twitter. So if you, social media friend of mine, and you want to share something, Maxwell, you're really good at that. Greg, you're really good at that. I mean, feel free to let me know, and I'll just, I'll share it everywhere. So that's about it on the social media front. So if y'all ready for the poll, here we go. I was trying to think of some different things to do. Greg, you kind of gave me an idea with one of your Facebook posts earlier in the week, but I just thought, since this is the last meeting of the year, I thought I would do something like question 1. The Astros top moment for 2020. Astros signed Dusty Baker. Astros score 5 in the 9th inning to beat the Dodgers. ALCS Game 5 Correa walk-off, or the Astros beat the A's to clinch the ALDS, or something else. Number 2, this is a direct result of Greg Lucas's question about rivals. Who is the Astros' biggest rival? And I probably should have put currently, but I mean, you know, it's up to y'all. And should the Astros re-sign Correa? That's number 3. And finally, will Jordan be back for 2021? So feel free to answer the questions. And I guess we'll talk about it after our guest speaker, if you want to, Bob.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to show the logo or not? That's up to you.
Okay. Yeah. All right. All right. All right. As long as my internet doesn't spaz out on me here. So Mike, Vance, the one you sent out at 420, that's the final product?
Yes. We'll be getting, I emailed Marla right after I got Scott's email, I think. So she's going to be sending all the final versions. But yes, what you have is the final version. Yes. Okay.
I don't know if I can share a screen and run a poll at the same time. I don't want to take that chance. So I'll do about 10, 15 more seconds, and then I'll end the poll, and then I'll share news about our brand new chapter logo. Thank you to everybody involved. We started thinking about this way back in June, July, something like that. So, all right, I'm going to close the poll. Okay, and let me try to share my screen here. Okay, let me try to share my, kind of move this. This is the brand new chapter logo. What do y'all think?
Terrific.
Looks great.
Try to blow it up here a little bit.
I like
Nice.
it. Very nice, clean.
Kind of a play on the Sabre 44. All right. You will see this logo everywhere now. As Mike said, we might even print up some shirts here pretty quick. Get it put on a shirt. Maybe we can have business cards. Any little thing. I don't care. It'll be everywhere. So, all right. That's all I got, Bob.
That's terrific. As Joe says, a lot of time and attention went into that logo. A lot of people contributed, voted. And we think it came out pretty daggone good. We need it for our website. Whoops.
Sorry.
Okay, Gary. Incidentally, I did run it by Larry Dierker in case any of you are interested or concerned about his thoughts, and he loves it. So he saw it today. And while he's not with us tonight, he did say he thought it was a great job. So I wanted to let you know. Okay, let's get on with our meeting. I've been excited for almost 3 months now since I first heard Jerry speak. Jerry is a Babe Ruth, I use the word expert. He's spent a tremendous amount of time working on all aspects of Babe Ruth. He's written a book called Babe Ruth, A Superstar Legacy. And he wants to talk about not just the stats, but what did Babe Ruth mean to baseball, to the country, and to the world. So Jerry, I'm gonna turn this over to you, my friend, and thanks for being with us.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to share screen now, and I'm just going to make sure this will work. Just bear with me. Okay, and hang on. I'm just going to open up my slides. I never trust technology, so here we go. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
And maybe I can just move this. Can I move this over a little bit, or is it possible to move those this section? Or who? Joe, are you running the meeting?
Yeah. What do you want me to move?
Move the faces over a little bit to the side. Is it possible to do that? Or if not,
You would have to move. People would have to move their windows individually.
okay. All right. Never mind. Okay. Okay. So we'll go with this. All right. So great. Okay. Well, thanks very much. It's a pleasure talking to your group. I want to wish everyone happy holidays, and let's all hope that 2021 is a better year than 2020. Hopefully, with the news that's come down today, it'll turn out that way. I'm talking about the vaccine, of course. So let's begin. Now, when you think of superstars, who comes to mind? Now, if we're talking about athletes, you might think of Michael Jordan. You might think of, well, today, LeBron James, Muhammad Ali in boxing. If we're talking about movies, it could be a Meryl Streep, or from an earlier day, Katharine Hepburn. If we're talking about the world of finance, Warren Buffett comes to mind. He's the guy who's done pretty well for himself. Well, what about newspaper columnists? One of the biggest columnists today is George F. Will. He's a syndicated columnist for the Washington Post. He writes about lots of things. He's won the Pulitzer Prize. And you could call George F. Will a superstar columnist. Well, that same guy, George Will, called the guy I'm going to talk about today the first national superstar. Not just in sports, the first national superstar. 100 years after this guy's birth, Hofstra University held a conference about him. And they said he's still a major influence on things intellectual, educational, and cultural. And I was at that conference. That was in 1995. In 2012, a jersey that he wore sold at auction for $4.4 million. It was a Guinness World Record for an item of sports memorabilia. And last year, in June of 2019, that record was broken when another of his jerseys sold for $5.6 million. In 2017, the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. hosted an exhibit of photos and artwork about him and his life. Now, this gallery, the National Portrait Gallery at the Smithsonian, they do this kind of exhibit for people like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. And they did one on this guy. And the curator at the Smithsonian, a PhD in history no less, an expert on the Civil War and on American presidents, said, quote, "He is the most famous American name in the world." I'm talking about Babe Ruth. And if you look over my shoulder, he's actually paying attention to make sure I don't get anything wrong here today. So George Herman Babe Ruth is really the topic of my discussion today. And it's about his impact on legacy, but it goes far beyond baseball and sport. It involves history, culture, the arts, and most definitely business, branding, and marketing. In fact, Babe Ruth was a marketing machine who set the mold. Now today, any organization that wants to build a name for itself, sell a product, or deliver a service can actually learn a lot from Babe Ruth. Just think that this is a guy who smothered America with his presence at a time when there were no computers, no internet, no social media. There wasn't even TV. Yet, he made himself a legend, and there was a lot more to it than myth, though I argue myth may be part of it. So how did he do it, and what can we take from his playbook? Well, today I want to tell you a lot about Babe Ruth and his enormous impact and how he made history. And I'm not just talking about on the baseball field. Now, sure, he had all his home runs from inside the box, the batter's box, but believe me, this is a guy who also was thinking outside the box. I'm talking about things like the way he used words, his sense of humor, his sense of timing, his sense of place and purpose, how he reached out to people, to the masses and also to targeted groups. This guy may have invented the concept of market segmentation. He was a trendsetter and a visionary. And he, maybe more than any other person before or since, was able to use fact and fiction and achieve his objectives and build a legend. Babe Ruth created a brand that has endured all these years and still continues to generate recognition today. And that's why companies like IBM, Sony, Citibank, Mercedes, countless others, IBM, use him, many still use him to sell products. Now what is a brand? I was looking for all kinds of definitions, and here's one that I particularly like, a brand. A brand is a combination of attributes communicated through a name or symbol that influences the mind of an audience and creates value. The value of a brand resides in the promise that the product or service will in fact deliver. So, for those of us of a certain vintage, you may remember that Gene Krupa was the Babe Ruth of drummers. Warren Buffett, whom I just mentioned a moment ago, is the Babe Ruth of investors. I'm Canadian. They used to call Gordie Howe the Babe Ruth of hockey. And Johnny Carson was known as the Babe Ruth of late night talk show TV. Now, I don't know anyone else from any walk of life whose name is used that way. The fact is that the name Babe Ruth, it means something in the public domain. And it goes beyond baseball. It means excellence. It means the best. The question is, why? Well, to answer that, I think we have to think of three words: business value proposition. Now think about this. When consumers buy something, when we buy something, we want safety, security, and sustainability. Well, Babe Ruth is all of that. But more than anything, consumers want trust. And Babe Ruth hit that one right out of the park. So he delivers big time even today, more than 70 years after his death. Now, make no mistake, Babe Ruth was quite a business all by himself, though he had help from people like Christy Walsh, who was the first sports agent. I'm going to talk about Christy Walsh a little bit later. But the point is, Babe Ruth set the mold for marketing and for celebrity, and in many ways for marketing itself. He was a visionary and a man ahead of his time. Now, why do I say that? Well, let's examine a few things about it. First of all, Babe Ruth knew exactly who he was and what he was. Not just a baseball player, but in fact, a performer. He understood that baseball wasn't only a national pastime, it was part of the very fabric of America. And keep in mind that back then, there wasn't a competition from other team sports like we have today. Baseball was pretty well lit. So he knew what he was selling. He knew the product. Third, he understood something about marketing that the big shots in the commissioner's office of baseball did not understand. Why do I say that? Well, in those days, Major League Baseball had only 16 teams, and the furthest west was St. Louis. So Babe Ruth, every season, he went on his famous barnstorming tours, taking players to cities and towns that didn't have teams of their own, major league teams of their own. And he did this throughout his whole career. So he was spreading the product, selling the brand, winning over new converts. What did baseball do with his barnstorming tours? Baseball suspended him and fined him for barnstorming. Finally, other point I want to make is that Babe Ruth was a man of principle who stood up to his guns. Now, he knew what he was worth, and he got it, by far the highest paid player of his day. But he also stood up to the owners on something else. He stood up to the owners on matters of race. And this is an area that hasn't really got a whole lot of attention. Babe Ruth recognized that the old Negro leagues had some pretty good ball players that people wanted to see. He played with and against both Black and Latino players as early as 1918, when he was still with the Red Sox, before he even went to the Yankees. And he did that throughout his entire career, much to the chagrin of Major League Baseball. Now, people have told me, starting with the Ruth family, but other people who have researched this as well, that the reason Babe Ruth never became a manager after he retired was because he would have advocated the hiring of Black ball players. Now, baseball was segregated, as we all know, until Jackie Robinson in 1947. Ruth died 1 year later in 1948. Now, I'm going to return to that a little bit later. So the point I want to make is Babe Ruth, he knew his role, he knew his audience, he knew the market, and he knew the product. And he knew that history doesn't sell, but nostalgia certainly does. It must, because he's still selling like gangbusters today. Oops, did we lose something here? Did we lose my slides?
We lost Babe's picture, which is.
We lost your slides. Yes, we lost your slides.
Why did that happen? All right, hang on. Just a second here. I don't know.
Greg, are you sharing your screen too? Were you sharing?
I didn't touch anything. All right, let's try again. All right.
I can't hear you.
I got you. Okay.
Okay, you
So-
see it now?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Jerry.
Jerry.
Okay. All right, fine. Okay, so, all right, everybody can hear me and everybody can see my slides?
No, I can't see your
No,
slide.
there are no slides up at all.
Go ahead and share your screen again, Jerry.
All right, hang on, just bear with me. Bear with me, here we go. All right. Okay, we can,
Yeah, I can see it.
okay.
Give to the Bambino.
There we
All
are.
right. Okay. Okay. So Roger Angel is probably the most famous baseball writer in the world. And actually, a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, the guy turned 100 years old, Roger Angel. So in the same way that George Will called Babe Ruth the first national superstar, Roger Angel called him the model for modern celebrity. So let's go back to the time of Babe Ruth. What was the world like back then in the 20s? Well, there was a new kind of stardom emerging that combined personality with marketing and technology. Personality, marketing, and technology. And like Roger Angel says, Babe Ruth was the model, and he was. In the 1920s, you had moving pictures, you had the transmission of the human voice. This was new technology. The result, Babe Ruth was everywhere. The most famous person in America. Now, the formula still applies today, personality, marketing, and technology. But the technology, of course, has changed a lot. It's changing by the day, and it's hard to keep up. But while there was no online world, when Babe Ruth was around, I said there wasn't even TV, never mind the online world, there's still a lot of lessons to be learned from the first marketing superstar. Now, I've been studying Babe Ruth for over 25 years, actually even more than that. Ever since I started research, was for my first novel. Let me just bring this up here. It was called Gift of the Bambino. And it came out in 2002 in Canada and came out in 2004 in the States. And in a nutshell, Gift of the Bambino was a novel, a work of fiction about a young boy and his grandfather and how they're bound by baseball in the spirit of Babe Ruth. So even though it was a work of fiction, I did a lot of research on Babe Ruth to write this. And I've written many, many articles to do with Ruth. This was probably the first one. This came out after the book came out in Canada. This is what, 2002. This was in the Toronto Star, which is Canada's largest newspaper. And it's a story about how that novel came about. A picture is worth a book of words. And you see in the middle of this, the little photograph in the middle. That is a photograph, and my father is actually in the photo. In fact, curiously enough, he's wearing number 3 in the back. And it's a basketball team from 1934. And they were the City of Toronto Bantam basketball champion team. Now, around the same time, I got this photo, by the way, about 6 months after my father passed away. So I had never seen this photo of him as a boy. He's about, what, 14, 15. Never saw this photo when he was alive. So I got this photo, and it was around that time I found out about Babe Ruth's first official home run in a professional game, which occurred in Toronto in 1914. His only home run in AAA ball playing for the Providence Grays, September 5th, 1914. Anyway, all the characters, the boys in this actual photograph became characters in my novel, Gift of the Bambino. So I kept doing research on Ruth over the years because he intrigued me. And 2 years ago, this book came out. It's a nonfiction book, Babe Ruth, A Superstar's Legacy. And the foreword of the book was written by Babe Ruth's grandson, Tom Stevens, who's become a friend of mine. So this is the first book that's ever been written about the legacy of Babe Ruth. I mentioned Tom Stevens wrote the foreword, the Ruth family was involved, and there's also extensive interview with Babe's daughter, Julia Ruth Stevens, who passed away last year at the age of 102. So I just want to tell you briefly about this book. And I'll start with the cover. I found this photograph, I guess, gee, it must be maybe 3 years ago now. And I had never seen this photo before, and I was quite intrigued by it. It was a single photo, 16 by 20 in a wooden frame, one photograph. And I thought, this is quite a photo. That would make a wonderful addition to the book, maybe the cover. So I found out the photo was purchased in 2004 by a collector, a guy named Scott Ireland. And he flew to New York because this photo was part of an auction. The photograph was taken in 1920. Ruth's first season with the Yankees. It was taken during a game in the dugout, all right, in the dugout during the game. And in the photo, I mean, he looks like he's 25, powerful guy who can hit 700 plus home runs, right? Anyway, I spoke to Ireland, the collector, and he gave us permission to use the photo. And he bought the photo at the auction, and he bought it for $150,000, right? This was back in 2004. Now, Babe Ruth signed that photograph. It's called a single signed photograph because his is the only name on it. That was the first photograph, the first single signed photograph of anyone from any walk of life, anywhere in the world that sold for over $100,000. So he gave us permission to use that on the cover, and for which I was very thankful. The forward, I mentioned Tom Stevens. This is a photo of Tom and his mother, Julia. That was in 2008. That was the last game at Yankee Stadium, old Yankee Stadium, the house that Ruth built. It was in 2008, I believe. And Julia was there to throw out the first pitch. And I believe she got it over the strike, which wasn't bad. Got it over home plate for a strike. And considering that she was well into her 90s, that wasn't too bad. So I'll just go very briefly through the book, what it gets into. The Enigma, it starts off with the exhibit at the Smithsonian in Washington, which was 2016, 2017. All photos and artwork about Ruth. It lasted for about 11 months, that exhibit. Second chapter is Daddy's Girl. This is the daughter, Julia. This is in the 1940s, this photo, after Ruth retired. This is at their home. And I spent about, an afternoon with Julia when she was living at her home in New Hampshire. And to say that was an incredible afternoon would be an understatement. As I say, she was well into her 90s at that time, but she was just as sharp as a tack. And actually have a website with interviews, including interview with Julia, which is really fascinating to listen to. So she was the last surviving member of the Babe Ruth household, Julia. And she passed away just last year at age 102. This chapter's The Legacy begins with Ruth's death in 1948, and it looks at, stories, obituaries written about him in America, Canada, Cuba, England, Japan, all over the world. And I call that The Legacy Begins. And then we have a chapter about Cooperstown. Now, this is another thing where Ruth is so unique. I don't think you can say this about any other sport. You go to Cooperstown today, and Ruth is unquestionably still the face of Cooperstown. There's no other player that has the profile at Cooperstown that Ruth does. And he last played in a game in 1935. You go to where the Hall of Fame plaques are. There's the statues of Ruth and Ted Williams. They had an artwork exhibit up on the second floor. So they have the called shot home run. This was another profiles, more artwork, and they started that off with a picture of Ruth as well, because the guy is just everywhere. There's another chapter in the book. I don't know, I imagine a number of you maybe have been to the Babe Ruth birthplace and museum in Baltimore, which is in the very tenement building where Ruth was born. And it's a story about Michael Gibbons, the guy who was the executive director of that institution for about 37 years, and he's still involved. And I would argue that Michael Gibbons probably knows more about Babe Ruth than anyone. And as I say, it's in the actual tenement house where Ruth was born in 1895. And they've got a lot of interesting things there. This is just one. This is when Ruth was a boy attending St. Mary's Industrial School. This is from the chapel. It was a hymnal book. And he wrote, they found this underneath by accident, the first known signature of Babe Ruth, taken when he was about 12 years old. And he signed it, George H. Ruth, world's worst singer, world's best pitcher. He was about 12. Complete with spelling mistakes and punctuation errors, which probably just adds to its value. I would love to know what that would be worth. But that is the first known autograph of Babe Ruth when he was about 12. So that institution has a lot of things like that. The Babe Ruth League, which got going in 1952. It's for sports, baseball and softball, boys and girls. Starts at age 4, goes to about age 18. It's kids baseball. They have, well, this year with COVID, of course, was an exception. It was an unusual year, but in a normal year, there's over 1 million players involved and over 2 million volunteers. So that's 3 million people involved in the Babe Ruth League, which makes that one of the world's largest sports organizations. Norwegian Airlines, a couple of years ago, they put Babe Ruth on the tail fins of their jets, serving Norwegian Airlines serving their U.S. destinations. And they call it their American Heroes program, and Babe Ruth was the first American hero. And there he is in the back. Again, prior to COVID, he was flying across the North Atlantic every day. Maybe not as often these days, but eventually, those flights will be going across on a regular basis again. So that gets into the use of the Babe Ruth name to this day. There's a couple chapters in the book about the world of sports memorabilia and sports collecting. Believe it or not, this business today is a billion-dollar industry. $1 billion industry. That's how big it is. And Babe Ruth is unquestionably far and away the #1 player. This is a baseball that he signed. This particular baseball sold for $388,000. There's special things attached to the baseball, but that's also a record. The world record jersey, this is from 2012, the jersey that sold for $4.4 million. An online auction with a lot of high rollers. It runs actually over a couple weeks, 3 weeks. And I did a whole chapter on this as if the reader is someone attending this auction. And of course, last year, that record was broken when another jersey sold for even more, $5.6 million. The Babe Ruth effect is about the impact of Babe Ruth in different countries around the world. I get into Japan a great deal, but also other countries outside of the States. And finally, the legend, the hero, the man. Excuse me. This gets into some of the statues, plaques, things like that about Babe Ruth. This is the Babe Ruth statue at Camden Yards in Baltimore. Ruth, of course, is a native of Baltimore, and it's a 16-foot bronze sculpture of Babe Ruth at Camden Yards. And I interviewed Susan Lurie. She's the sculptress who built that and made it, won the commission, which went up in 1996. And when she won that commission, she had never attended a baseball game in her life. So she learned a lot quickly. But that's the largest statue of Babe Ruth anywhere in the world. Okay, so that basically is what this book gets into. All different aspects of Ruth, goes far beyond baseball. So let's talk a little bit about his impact. So when we talk about the impact of Ruth, I like to say that Babe Ruth really represented a perfect storm. When he was traded, sold, a little bit of both actually, from the Red Sox to the Yankees in 1920, it was like a perfect storm, and I'll tell you why. First, you have to look at the time, the dawn of the Roaring '20s. It was a time of new technologies like the teletype machine, which let you disseminate news immediately, news like baseball scores. You had the emergence of national products like Coca-Cola, for example. There was a huge rise in advertising expenditures, and the whole thing was geared to the phenomenon of consumption, products for people to consume. So this is the decade in the Roaring '20s when advertising and public relations really took off as major industries. Also, 1920, America and its allies just came out of the Great War, World War I, so there was a lot of excitement and enthusiasm in the air. Okay, that's the first point. The second part of the perfect storm is the place, New York City. At one time, New York City, and this is unbelievable when you think about it now, at one time, New York City had 18 daily newspapers all going at once, 18. And sports was taking up more space in them every day. And New York was also where people came to make their dreams come true, and this was especially true in the Roaring '20s. And the last element of the perfect storm is you had this charismatic, larger-than-life personality, Babe Ruth. So all these things came together, and like I say, a legend was born. So how did he do it? Well, let's start with words. He said things like, never let the fear of striking out get in the way. Now, that's a baseball phrase, but it goes far beyond baseball. There's a website, BabeRuthCentral.com. Today is run by Brent Stevens, who is the great-grandson of Babe Ruth. And they have a company called BR Goods. And one of the things they do is sell T-shirts with Babe's famous sayings emblazoned across the chest. Like that one, or it's hard to beat a person who never gives up. Another one, every strike brings me closer to the next home run. Now, that's pretty inspirational. I want to give you an example here of how inspirational. In 2014, Barry Cressman, he was the longtime pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Titusville, Pennsylvania. He was about to retire after 42 years on the pulpit. Now, this church has a huge congregation and they have their own YouTube channel. So what subject did the pastor choose for a sermon that day? He wanted to talk about failure, and he chose Babe Ruth. That's right, Babe Ruth in a talk about failure. The sermon began like this. With the coming of spring, our thoughts turn to the great American sport of baseball. For those of us of a certain vintage, we invariably think of Babe Ruth as the great Sultan of SWAT. But did you know that Babe Ruth struck out 1,330 times? And I find that significant. You and I also fail. So Babe Ruth did hit 714 home runs, but he also struck out 1,330 times. And by the way, it's still a pretty good ratio. But the point is, this is a guy who inspired the masses when he was alive, and even today, 70 years after he's gone. Some of the other sayings you can get on shirts are things like, I swing big with everything I've got, I hit big or I miss big, I live as big as I can. And this one, as I mentioned, it's hard to beat a person who never gives up. That's the #1 seller. So Babe Ruth is a guy who really came from nothing, and he made something of himself. And in that journey, he taught us some lessons. He had very little formal education. I think it was grade 8. little education in school and also in the greater realm of life. And yet he is quoted and revered by world leaders, religious scholars, and leading thinkers to this day. As I say, the guy was a source of inspiration and hope. So what can we learn from him? Well, let's start with humor. When it was pointed out that he made more money than the president, he said, well, he shrugged and he said, I had a better year, right? So it wasn't rehearsed, it was natural. So people liked Babe Ruth. He was a funny guy and he made people laugh. And like I say, he was very natural. Now, I want to show you something here. I hope this will work. And just bear with me. It's a video from a movie that was made, hold on. Okay, it's a silent movie made in 1928 by comedian. And there's a clip here with Babe Ruth. Harold Lloyd is a taxi driver who drives like a maniac to the streets of Manhattan. And I'm going to try to play this for you here. Hang on. And it's just a clip of Babe Ruth. Here we go.
Yeah, New York cabbies still drive that way.
Okay, everybody still with me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right.
Yep, still with you.
All right.
Funny.
Yeah, it's a clip. Like I say, he picks him up, takes him to the Yankee Stadium, and the guy was a natural. People really liked. Photographers loved Babe Ruth. Filmmakers loved him because he was so accommodating to them. So, like, he was a funny guy, and but he also had a lot to do with value, which is why companies like Mercedes would use him in a commercial, and so did Jeep. And I want to show, this is a commercial that ran a year ago from Jeep. Yeah. So you see the first legend they use in that commercial is Babe Ruth. Now, before the 2019 baseball season, the New York Yankees had a commercial just before the season started. And I don't know if you remember this, but they got a new pitcher, Adam Ottavino, who joined the Yankees. And he created some waves right away, because when he went to the Yankees, he said that he could strike out Babe Ruth every time. So the Yankees put Adam Ottavino into a commercial. And this is how the commercial went. Okay. All right. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, good. So the point I want to make is Babe Ruth still has cachet today because he's used by all these companies. The Yankees use him. I mean, everybody's using him. And I'm going to show you a little bit more of that, more about what I mean. So humor aside, what can we learn from Babe Ruth? Well, late in his career, when he was asked about retirement, this is what he said. He said, all baseball players should quit when it starts to feel as if the baselines run uphill. And something else he said was, yesterday's home runs don't win today's games, which is another way of saying, what have you done for me lately? And like other things I mentioned, that goes far beyond baseball. And by the way, that quote, yesterday's home runs don't win today's games, is the very first quote on a website that's all about marketing, corporate marketing, and the Babe Ruth is number one. So as I say, the guy was born dirt poor. He had no real family to speak of, little formal education. His childhood was right out of a Dickens novel, and he was rough around the edges. But you put it all together, and people could identify with him and empathize with him. Now, what is empathy? It's the ability to recognize and share the emotions of another person. Now, Ruth also had virtues like honesty, charity, and a complete sense of unselfishness. There was no pretense. So think of marketing without pretense. He was also pretty good at focusing on the objective. Anyone that hits home runs off major league pitching, I think you can say knows how to focus. But Babe Ruth was in a special class because it wasn't just how many home runs he hit, it was when he hit them. He held the record for most World Series home runs for almost 30 years. And as a pitcher, he held the record for throwing the most consecutive scoreless innings in the World Series for over 30 years. In fact, as a pitcher for the Red Sox, he was on 3 World Series teams before coming to the Yankees. After he left the Red Sox, we know what happened, the famous curse of the Bambino. They didn't win another one for 86 years. When he came to the Yankees, they had never won a thing. With him, they were in 7 World Series and won 4, and he went on to basically make the New York Yankees the most famous sports franchise in the world. So the guy was basically a winner. Also, when we talk about focusing when dealing with distractions, I think the 1932 World Series in Chicago with the called shot home run might be the best example of that. He points to the fences and he hits the next one out. And everybody's debated whether, in fact, he did point to the fence in the called shot home run. I don't know if you saw this. It was a few weeks ago. There was a video surfaced of Lou Gehrig, an interview that Lou Gehrig did shortly after the 1932 World Series. And it was an interview where he was asked about the called shot home run. Gehrig, of course, was up at the plate after Ruth. He was watching watching what was taking place. And in the interview, he said, yes, in fact, Ruth pointed to the outfield, to the fence, and pointed and hit the next one out. So if that myth or whatever goes to rest with that, so be it. But that's what Gehrig said in this interview that just surfaced. So another example about Ruth. In 1934, the American League All-Stars toured Japan. Now that year, Ruth was 39 years old. His abilities were on the decline. He had only 22 homers that year, and that was his last year with the Yankees, by the way. And keep in mind that in 1934, U.S.-Japanese relations were not very good. This is in the years leading up to World War II. But in that series with the best ball players in Japan, he was the MVP of the tournament. He had 13 home runs in 17 games. And a lot of people don't know this, but he was also the manager of the team. He managed the American League All-Stars. So he was the ultimate ambassador for America. In fact, the man who was America's ambassador to Japan at the time said Ruth has done something that he never could have done himself. And today there are statues and plaques honoring Ruth all over Japan. So we talk about impact. What kind of impact did he have? Well, let's go to World War II. When Japanese troops stormed US Marines in the Battle of the Pacific, what was their battle cry? To hell with Babe Ruth, the most insulting thing they could say to Americans. Now, another thing here, and a lot of people don't know this, but in 1945, when Nazi Germany had surrendered, but the Japanese still refused to lay down their arms, 1945, the US State Department was actually considering making a recording of Babe Ruth's voice, which would play over the ocean, over the airwaves, and urge the Japanese to surrender. They were actually thinking of making the recording of Ruth. They didn't do it, as it turned out, but they were considering doing that. So how big was he? Well, today we have sports writers who cover teams. Marshall Hunt was a writer with the New York Daily News. His beat was Babe Ruth. All he did was cover Babe Ruth, and Ruth kept him busy. Okay, this is Robert Ripley, who a cartoonist, and he did this image of Babe Ruth in the New York Evening Post, 1922. That's the same Ripley, by the way, who started Ripley's Believe It or Not. And there he is, full page, the modern Colossus. So in the 1920s, starting in the 1920s, Ruth was absolutely everywhere. Cover of magazines, Vanity Fair, Popular Science, Babe Ruth's Home Run Secrets Solved by Science. Everywhere you went, you were seeing Babe Ruth. Now, I mentioned a while ago earlier about Christy Walsh. Christy Walsh Ruth was the first athlete to have an agent, which is Christy Walsh, and he was the first athlete to have his own personal trainer. Now, Walsh was a cartoonist who worked in advertising. At one point, he actually lost his job, and he was looking for something to do. He ultimately started ghosting for Babe Ruth and other athletes, and he built a syndicate of 34 writers who ghosted for famous athletes. Most of them were baseball players. Ruth, of course, was the biggest. So Christy Walsh helped mold the image of Ruth and helped make him into a hero. And he made him a pitchman who sold everything. And he associated Ruth's name with excellence, and it stuck. And Babe Ruth sold absolutely everything. This is just an example, underwear, sweaters, hats, games. First guy on Wheaties, the Breakfast of Champions. He sold if you go to Cooperstown and you go to the Giamatti library, you can look at the Babe Ruth scrapbooks. I spent an afternoon there. There's 25 Babe Ruth scrapbooks, and you get an idea of how much in the public eye this guy was. And I don't think anyone, even today with the technology we have, there's anyone who was in the public eye as much as Ruth was. It's just incredible. But the thing about Christy Walsh, his syndicate wound up in 1938. Christy Walsh himself died in 1955. But now we're in 2020, and Ruth still lives on today. The thing with Ruth is that this whole thing with him and marketing and promoting and using his name, it never stopped, even after he died. The Babe Ruth League got going in 1952. It was originally called the Little Bigger League. This is 4 years after he died. The organizers of the league went to Claire Ruth's widow, and asked if they could change the name of their league to the Babe Ruth League. They did, and it took off. And as I say, with players and volunteers, they've got over 3 million people involved in that today. So that got going in 1952. 1974, the Babe Ruth Museum, birthplace and museum, opened in Baltimore. In 1976, Babe Ruth is on the cover of Time magazine. Why? Well, this was April 76. Yankee Stadium had just been refurbished, right? So who did they put on the cover? They made a cartoon figure of Ruth, put him on top of Yankee Stadium, and the fans are pouring through his feet, going through the gates to Yankee Stadium. I mean, they could have used Reggie Jackson or any other number of guys playing for the Yankees, but who did they use? Babe Ruth, and this is 28 years after his death. 1983, the U.S. Postal Service put him on a stamp. 1995, the conference, that's Hofstra University, 3-day conference, baseball and the Sultan of Swat. And I was at that conference. That's where I first actually met Tom Stevens and the daughter of Ruth, Julia, though they were at the conference. And this was an incredible conference. They got into all kinds of things. I think Mel Allen was there. Giuliani actually was invited. He was the mayor to come and speak, and he didn't show up, whatever. But they had home run hitters there like Ralph Kiner, a home run hitter from an earlier era. And they asked him, they said, this was 1995, by the way, commemorating the 100th anniversary of Ruth's birth. He was born in 1895. And they asked Kiner, they said, if Babe Ruth was playing today, how many home runs do you think he would hit? And Kiner said, about 20. And the questioner said, 20, is that all? And Kiner said, yeah, but you got to understand, the guy would be 100 years old. So he got a big laugh out of that. But that's, again, the image of Babe Ruth. So that conference, I don't know how many people were there, but it was pretty huge. 1996, the statue of Ruth at Camden Yards went up. 1998, U.S. Postal Service puts him on another stamp. I think the only other baseball player who's on 2 stamps would be Roberto Clemente, if I'm not mistaken. 2002, statue went up in Japan, Sendai City, Japan. Now, this is on the site where one of those games was. There used to be a baseball park here in the 1934 tour. And in this game in Japan, Ruth hit 2 home runs in that game. And in 2002, they erected a statue of Babe Ruth on the site where that ballpark used to stand. Now, this is kind of interesting. Ryozo Kato, a gentleman in the middle, he was the former Japanese ambassador to the United States when George W. Bush was president. He was the Japanese ambassador to the U.S. And when he left public service, he became the commissioner of Nippon Professional Baseball, the big leagues in Japan. So I interviewed him, and he told me about what he called the Babe Ruth effect and the impact Ruth had not only on Japanese baseball, but in Japanese culture. And he sent me a photograph. And I didn't realize that at first. I thought it was not much of a photo, but then I realized this is a photo taken a few years ago. Mr. Kato is in the middle. He's the commissioner. They had the top pitcher to his right and the top hitter to his left. And that hitter was a 17-year-old Shohei Ohtani. He's 17, and there he is. That was Ohtani, and that was the photograph he sent me. Of course, they're calling him the second Babe Ruth, but I think that might be a little premature. He is a hitter and a pitcher, as we know. In 2006, I mentioned earlier the home run that Babe Ruth hit in Toronto in 1914. Hanlon's Point is, that's what the SABR chapter in Toronto was called, by the way, the Hanlon's Point chapter. There was an old ballpark. If you know Toronto, there are these islands in Lake Ontario off the mainland. And there used to be an old ballpark where the AAA Toronto Maple Leafs played in AAA ball. And September 5th, 1914, Ruth was a pitcher with the Providence Grays. And he pitched the second end of a doubleheader. He pitched a 1-hit, 9-0 shutout against the Toronto Maple Leaf baseball team. And he hit a 3-run homer. And it's the only home run he ever hit in the minor leagues. He was playing with the Red Sox before that 1914 season was over. But we Canadians like to say that Ruth hit his first pro home run in Canada, which drives Americans crazy. But in fact, it was the first official home run he hit as a pro in an official league game, not an exhibition game. So anyway, we had this plaque erected on the site where the ballpark used to be. And it was a day when the Yankees were in Toronto playing the Blue Jays, and both teams were involved in that as well. So that was quite an event. This is the jersey that sold for $4.4 million in 2012. The exhibit at the Smithsonian, 2016 and 17. Norwegian Airlines, I mentioned about the flights that use him in the American Heroes program. 2018, he was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And this is interesting. This was also 2018. I was reading my Saturday paper one morning when I'm still getting it in print. I'm not anymore. And there's a full-page ad of Babe Ruth. His finger called the shot. Next up, your prostate. It's about encouraging men to have a prostate exam. And was so I figured, what the heck is this? And I spoke to Tom Stevenson. He said, yes, they gave permission for this. This was a full-page ad that ran in major newspapers all over the U.S. and all over Canada, including the New York Times. And then it ran in the spring, and then again it ran in the fall. What's interesting, it never says Babe Ruth anywhere in the ad, but it doesn't have to, because people know who it is. And I thought that was kind of cool. I just opened it up one Saturday morning. I figured, what the heck is this? And there he is. 2019, another world record. This jersey sold for $5.64 million. That was an auction at Yankee Stadium in June of 2019. They sold a lot of Babe Ruth items, and this broke the sports memorabilia record again. And by the way, I mentioned about the billion-dollar industry of sports collecting, sports memorabilia. When I was doing research for my book, this is quite amazing. When I talk about sports collecting and sports memorabilia, we're talking about any sport in the world. Now, baseball is probably more preeminent than other sports in the world of sports collecting, but it could be about any sport in the world, any athlete in the world, from any country in the world. When I was doing research for my book, this was maybe 2017, I found a list of the top 15 items of sports memorabilia that had ever been sold. Right? Any sport in the world, any athlete in the world, any country in the world. 7 of those top 15 items were Babe Ruth items, which is it's phenomenal. One of the top executives in the industry told me there are 2 categories in this business. There's Babe Ruth and there's everyone else. And that's basically how it is to this day. Okay, so let me see. Okay, we talked about that. We should go to the prostate exam. Oh, and this is kind of sad because when I started using this picture I saw of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I first showed this, and it was just a few weeks after that she passed away. But it was a T-shirt that was being sold with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and it says Babe Ruth, right? So I would think that T-shirt's probably a pretty big seller these days. Now, a lot of people don't know about this. We did a 4-part podcast called Babe Ruth Master Marketer. And the last segment, we talked about how Babe Ruth beat a pandemic, the Spanish flu, the influenza in 1918. That year, Ruth caught the Spanish flu twice. He caught it in the spring, was hospitalized. It was a shortened season that year because of the Spanish flu. The World Series was held in September instead of October. And health officials told baseball not to hold the World Series at all, but they did hold it. Ruth was a pitcher with the Red Sox, and he pitched 2 games in the World Series. He won them both, won by a shutout. But at that time, this in September, he was sick with the Spanish flu again. And he was so ill, in the games he was pitching, he actually had to rest, lie down on the bench in the dugout when the other team, when his team was at bat, when the Red Sox were at bat. That's how ill he was, but he beat it. And like I say, he won 2 games in the World Series. So he beat the pandemic twice. There's a party held every year, the Babe Ruth birthday party. This was held, I think it was February 1st at one of the major sports bars in Detroit. And that's me in the middle there. I'm with Tom Stevens, Babe's grandson, his son, Brent Stevens, a great grandson. And this is a fellow who organizes this party every year. This was a big sports bar in Detroit. It was February 1st. Nobody really knew anything about COVID. We just thought this is something that's happening in China. We didn't know anything about it here. There was over 1,000 people at that bar that night. And when I came back later, and then the lockdown wasn't long after that, I wondered, God, I mean, it was kind of scary. But anyway, it was a big night. It was February 1st, and it was the annual Babe Ruth party. And they had all kinds of things on the wall, like a Mount Rushmore with Babe Ruth on. And it's kind of interesting, you know, Mike Gibbons, the guy who ran the Babe Ruth Museum for so many years, told me this. He's the guy, he said, probably knows more about Ruth than anybody. And he said if there was a Mount Rushmore of Americans, not just American presidents, but of Americans, period, and 4 people were on it, he contends that Babe Ruth would be one of the 4 people on it. So I think that's kind of an interesting comment. Now, the Luminary Group is a company in Indiana, and they represent the estates of dead celebrities, deceased celebrities. Guess who their biggest client is today? Babe Ruth. Again, more than 70 years after his passing. This is a list of companies. I'm going to get into this in a second. When I talked about the jersey in 2012, it sold for $4.4 million. Think of that figure, $4.4 million. That's almost twice what it cost to build Yankee Stadium in 1923. It cost $2.4 million to build the place in 1923. So Babe Ruth is kind of an interesting guy that way. I also looked at some stats focusing on that 2012 jersey that sold for $4.4 million. And I compared the growth in terms of an investment, Babe Ruth items, and I compared it to the stock market. So if you look at the stock market over the course of 100 years, the stock market grew at an annual rate of 10.4% over 100 years. Pretty good growth over a century. If you look at the Ruth jersey from 1920 that sold for $4.4 million in 2012, and you look at what it was worth when he was playing, in fact, the appreciation value of that as an investment has done better than the stock market over 100 years. It actually grew at a rate of 12.6% compounded over a century, which is better than the stock market. And as for the New York Yankees as a franchise, in 1915, the team was sold for a few $100,000. In 2017, just over 100 years later, Forbes magazine pegged the value of the Yankees at $3.7 billion. Well, that's pretty good growth over a century. But don't forget that a good chunk of that growth, especially in the 1920s and 30s, was due to one player. And we know who that was. They even had to build a stadium for him. It was due to Babe Ruth. Now, as far as companies that still use them to sell product or have used them recently, this is just a list. I mentioned Mercedes. Mercedes used them in a commercial that stressed value. Lipton's had them in a commercial that was about power. Finance institutions, banks, financial companies, they use them because he embodies those qualities of safety, security, and sustainability, which I was talking about earlier. And these are qualities that have to be earned. This is just a partial list of companies, some companies that have used Babe Ruth to sell product. And some of them are still using him today. And there are some big names. There's Sony, Chevrolet, Bud Light, Boeing. There's Mercedes. There's a lot of sports companies, Pepsi, Panini Sports. They make cards, Citibank, Nike, Adidas, Visa, Coors Light. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Now, another part of Ruth's legacy that often gets ignored is that he was also the first celebrity philanthropist who supported countless charities. Now, when he was with the Red Sox and later with the Yankees, they had their spring training every spring, of course, in Florida. And in the state of Florida alone, Babe Ruth personally supported over 70 different charities. And 10 years ago, in 2010, his daughter Julia went with her grandson to Boise, Idaho, where Babe Ruth was inducted into the World Sports Humanitarian Hall of Fame. So that's part of his brand too. Now, as far as the issue of race is concerned, this is an interesting story. I think it was in 2004 or 2006. The great-grandson of Babe Ruth, Brent Stevens, was in Florida at a wedding. And another person who was a guest at that wedding was the great-grandson of Josh Gibson, the great black ball player who never played in the majors because of segregation, right? He hit over 800 home runs. They called him the Black Babe Ruth. So the two great-grandsons of these two famous baseball players met, became friends, and they commissioned a painting, a picture of their two great-grandfathers on a baseball field together, which never happened because of segregation. And they made limited edition prints of this and sold them for the not-for-profit Babe Ruth League, the baseball league, and the not-for-profit Josh Gibson Foundation for Underprivileged Kids in Pittsburgh. So I think that's a pretty cool story. And as I say, there are people that say that Ruth never became a manager because of his views on race, that he would have hired black ball players. And I personally think there's a lot to that story. So what do people say about Babe Ruth? James Barber, the curator at the Smithsonian.
Hey, Linda.
Well, hello?
I can't get any noise.
Can you hear me?
I can't get any noise on this. Any noise on what? On the computer.
Oh. Okay, shall I keep going here?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jerry. Go ahead. I took care of it.
Okay. All right. So Jim Barber, the curator at the Smithsonian, I say this is a guy who has a PhD in history. He's an expert on the Civil War and presidents. He said Ruth is the most famous American name in the world, which struck me coming from a guy with his background. Joe Orlando is one of the biggest executives.
Did you find the email? Yeah, and I'm on.
Yeah, he's got somebody's got to mute himself. Okay. Joe Orlando, an executive in the sports memorabilia industry. He said there's Babe Ruth. There's two categories. There's Ruth and then there's everyone else. Pete Enfield, the Luminary Group president that represents the Ruth estate. He said from a licensing perspective for a sports legend, he's at the very top. Bill Jenkinson, a baseball historian and author. And by the way, this is the guy who's probably researched this story about Ruth and the issue of race more than anyone else. In 2008, he gave the one and only eulogy for Babe Ruth. At Ruth's funeral in 1948, there was no eulogy. In 2008, on the 60th anniversary of Ruth's death, 2,500 people packed St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan, and they had a ceremony for Babe Ruth, and Bill Jenkinson gave the eulogy then. And he said we should recognize his greatest contribution to our common America. It wasn't the baseball records, but his legacy of hope. George Will, first national superstar, Roger Angel, the model for modern celebrity, and Mike Gibbons from the Babe Ruth Museum. He said he's not a cultural, he's a cultural icon, not just a sports icon. So I know you want to get to some questions, and before we do that, I thought there was one other thing I'd like to show you. We've got a four-part podcast series called Babe Ruth Master Marketer, and we've got a 3-minute little video which is about this, and I'd like to play it for you, and it tells you a little bit about what it's about. So just bear with me. Let me just close this. Hopefully nothing will explode here. And this is only 3 minutes. Hold on. Okay, here we go.
Don't follow the sound, Jerry.
It sounds not really good.
Can't hear it, Jerry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, you can't hear it?
No.
Oh,
We can see it, but we can't hear it. I mean, it's all gibberish.
Yeah, it's all gibberish. We can hear, but it's all gibberish.
well, I wonder why that is the case. Hang on a second. I know we did a trial run the other day, and of course, everything was fine.
Maybe it's just, I don't know. Maybe it's just that one video because everything else worked okay.
Yeah, no, it's strange. Well, then there's no point. I did send it to Joe. I know he's got a copy just in case.
Well, if anything, I'll share it on the Facebook page, Twitter page, and things like that. Why don't I do that?
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so you want to go to questions then?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Let's get you up on the screen.
Yep. Are there any questions?
Is
I
there
had a
sense
few.
of-
One on that photo that sold for so much money. I couldn't see Babe Ruth's signature on that. Where is it located?
You mean the cover?
Yeah, number
Yeah.
5. Yeah.
Oh, well, what he did, he signed it, if you just, here, he signed it at the bottom. I think at the bottom left, he wrote Babe Ruth. You can see there. And the other name is the name of the photographer. So that's what they call a single signed photograph. And that was taken in 1920, his first year with the Yankees.
So, so it's in the white, and it's not like a logo. That's his signature enhanced.
No, he just, yeah, this, again, this was made in 1920 and he just signed his name on it. I think he signed it on the back as well. And it actually sold for $149,500 at an auction. I believe it was 2004 or 2006. And that was the first photograph of a person, what they call a single signed photo, that ever sold anywhere in the world for over $100,000. I mean, we're talking kings, we're talking presidents, we're talking, prime ministers. No, nobody. This was the first time a photo of an individual that was signed by the individual sold for over $100,000. Yeah. And he didn't charge us when he gave us permission to use it on the cover, for which I was eternally grateful. So, yeah.
That was 1920, and they built Yankee Stadium what year?
23.
And you said it was built for Ruth. So was that Shark right field porch put there specifically for him?
Yeah, well, the Yankees were actually, renting from the Giants, and
Yeah.
sorry, yes. So it was in 1923 they built Yankee Stadium. And another thing, by the way, I didn't mention this, that Ruth's first year with the Yankees in 1920, attendance at Yankee games in the 1920 season more than doubled from the 1919 season, more than doubled. And that year, the Yankees became the first sports team in the world to draw over 1 million fans. It was all because of Babe Ruth. And again, keep in mind, this is after the Black Sox scandal, when baseball was at its, one of its greatest depths. So they say Ruth, saved the game. And he may have saved it again during the Depression as well. But it's quite significant. So there's a strong financial side to Ruth. I saw an accountant some time ago did an analysis of how much money the Yankees made from Babe Ruth, looking at what they paid him and what they reaped in profit from him, and it was a very good investment they made in getting Babe Ruth. He paid off handsomely.
So the question was, his being a left-handed hitter, did that influence the design of Yankee Stadium?
Oh yeah, actually it did. It did for sure. But I want to mention another thing about his impact too. If you look at the years from I think 1919 to 1923 or 24, 4 or 5 year period, the number of home runs in baseball went up by something like was it 400% or 500%, because he changed the game. At his first year with the Yankees, 54 home runs, second year 59 home runs, and he changed the game quickly. And I think you could argue that in no other sport, I would make the case that in no other sport did someone change the game, change that sport so much and so quickly as Babe Ruth did in a 4 or 5 year time frame when he was recognized as the home run hitter, when he became a full-time hitter, and just made a huge change in the game. And then other people started hitting home runs too. But keep in mind, Babe Ruth routinely was out homering teams, right? Now that doesn't happen anymore, but that's what he used to do. He didn't just lead the league in home runs, which he did 12 times. He out-homered teams all by himself. So it's a major impact. But the dimensions of Yankee Stadium, yeah, for sure.
Is there and you may mention, I had to step out for a minute, but is there a sense of how Christy Walsh or someone else maybe actually may have coached him or mentored him and helped him build those marketing muscles? Do we know sort of where that came from?
The marketing, well, Christy Walsh was I think it's fair to say a marketing genius. And when he combined with Babe Ruth, I mean, this is like Batman and Robin. It was a great team. And it wasn't, Ruth actually was not big on getting involved with Christy Walsh in the first place, because Ruth was doing columns or ghosting, columns were being ghosted, and he would make $5 a column, $5. Well, Walsh got in to meet him finally and told him he could make $150 a column for him. So Ruth was interested, and they started a partnership, and it grew. And Walsh, like I said, he made Ruth a pitch man who sold everything. If you ever get down to Cooperstown again, make an appointment at the Giamatti Research Library and go have a look at the Babe Ruth scrapbooks. It will blow you away, the things that he did. He would come to town, he would be selling this, he'd go to an auto dealership, he'd be selling cars on the floor for an hour. They would use his name to promote the dealership. Another thing that was interesting about him when I looked at those scrapbooks, and they say there's 25 Babe Ruth scrapbooks at Cooperstown. And those scrapbooks, by the way, were started by Christy Walsh. You see all the photographs, unending stream of photos of Ruth visiting hospitals, orphanages, asylums, you name it. And Julia, the daughter, told me when I saw her that for every visit that Ruth made going to a hospital or an orphanage or something like that, for every visit that was publicized by the media, she said there were 50 visits that were not publicized by the media. And this is what the guy did. And like I say, I think that's part of his legacy too.
And is there a sense of his motivation? I mean, obviously he wanted to be a success, but did he have almost a kind of like a corporate mindset or some sort of bigger than an individual?
I think it's fair to say that Babe Ruth did not have a corporate mindset, and he wasn't a businessman as such. Like I say, the guy had a grade 8 education. And when he came to Boston, he was 19. He had never been in an elevator in his life, right? I mean, this guy was pretty raw and rough around the edges. But he wasn't stupid. He wasn't stupid. He held out for his salary. He knew what he was worth, as I said, and he got it. But it was a great combination with Christy Walsh, who was a master marketer. And they made Ruth, like I say, he's called the first modern celebrity. And I think it's true, not just from sport, but from any era. So I think every celebrity in any walk of life today probably owes something to Babe Ruth, because he really did pave the way. But Walsh had a lot to do with that too. They were a great team. But as I pointed out, Walsh died in 1955. Babe Ruth still lives on today. He's still, in fact, he sells more today than he did when he was playing, if you can believe it. I mean, that's how big his name is.
Harry?
Yeah.
You mentioned briefly about Babe Ruth and race. My question is, 1938, I believe it was, there were 50 prominent German Americans who wrote a letter to President Roosevelt to protest what was going on in Nazi Germany. And Ruth was the most prominent of those 50.
It was actually, I think it was in Maxwell, I think it was in 42, a little bit later. But there was a full-page ad taken out, and a lot of people don't know this. Thanks for mentioning it. Babe Ruth came from Pennsylvania Dutch family, a Germanic background, and a full-page ad was taken out in the New York Times. It may have been in other newspapers too. 50 prominent Americans of German ancestry put their names to I guess it was like a petition or a statement condemning Nazi Germany's persecution of European Jews. And the most prominent name on the list was Babe Ruth. So there you go. Yep.
I guess my question is, what prompted Babe Ruth to do that, and did it have any impact?
Well, they approached him to do it, and he did. So I think that's what it was. Well, actually, I remember when I was talking to Julia, I remember mentioning that to Julia, and as I recall, I don't even think she was aware of that thing. But she did tell me something else that was interesting. Babe Ruth went to Japan in '34, the American League All-Star Tour, made a huge impact, needless to say. And Julia told me that Pearl Harbor the other day, December 7th, right? When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, they were living in New York, right? And Julia was part of the household. And she told me she was with her mother, Claire, right? This was 1941. So it was a few years after Ruth retired. She said, and she remembered that Babe Ruth was so incensed and so pissed off. All the things the Japanese gave him in that tour, and they gave him all kinds of things, he went to the window and poured them out the window onto the street. He was so enraged after Pearl Harbor. And she told me she remembers him doing that. So, I mean, this is a guy who sold war bonds and was involved with the Red Cross during the war, and I mentioned, the State Department was thinking of making a recording of his voice to urge the Japanese to surrender. So I don't know. I mean, to me, that's impact. that's your impact. But there's an element of Ruth where he was just a very, decent guy. And I think his second wife, Claire, certainly did straighten him out. He was pretty rambunctious and wild in his earlier days, as we know. But there was a core of decency in the guy that was there, I think, for his whole life. And it's been said that he was a man in search of his childhood because he never really had much of a childhood. So I think that could be very true. But just a very, very intriguing guy, which is why I just got so enamored with him and intrigued. Initially just in writing a novel, but then I just saw there was so much more to this guy. And Julia told me when I saw her that she said, Daddy is bigger today than he was when he was playing. So, I mean, that's quite a statement.
Was 1934 that tour when Mo Berg was the catcher
Yes.
for Boston that photographed all the Japanese installations?
That's it.
He was
That's it,
a
Mike.
spy. Yes. Who was a spy. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a great line Babe Ruth has, by the way. Mo Berg was not a great ball player, right? But he was major leaguer. But apparently he spoke 6 or 7 languages. And when it was pointed out in that tour that Mo Berg spoke 7 languages and could get by in Japanese, Babe Ruth said, yeah, that might be true, but he can't hit in any of them. So I thought that was pretty funny. But the guy was taking pictures when he was there, for sure. Yeah.
And I had a comment just for your information. I went over to San Antonio to see my daughter 2 weekends ago, and we stayed at the Minger Hotel, which is the oldest hotel. It's right next door to the Alamo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And Teddy Roosevelt supposedly recruited Rough Riders in the bar there.
Yeah.
They had a bunch of photos in the hall. One was Heine Manouche because the 27 Tigers trained there, but they had one from 1926 at Babe Ruth in front of the hotel.
Oh, yeah.
That he was there, said under the picture, barnstorming to play the San Antonio Indians. You were talking about no teams west of St. Louis.
Yeah, right. Right.
And they had a 1922 Yankees team picture that he was front and center of.
Yeah.
When they came down to barnstorm in San Antonio at the same time. So I was wondering when he got fined and they made him quit doing it.
Well, he was fined more than once. Jane Levy, who wrote a great book about Babe Ruth, it came out about a year ago, which looked at the 1927 barnstorming tour. She gets into that. The Big Fella, which is a very good book. She gets into that barnstorming stuff in a big way. But another interesting thing about Ruth, too, and it's in the foreword to my book, Tom Stevens, the grandson. Tom, well, he's now retired, but Tom was an engineer. He did a lot of work for the U.S. military all over the world, including in the Middle East, and in places like Thailand and Afghanistan. And he's told me he's been to places like that, and people know who Babe Ruth is. In fact, he said he was in a bar in Thailand. There's a picture of Babe Ruth on the bar. He goes to Australia, and the top cricket player in Australia, they call him the Babe Ruth of cricket, right? So, I mean, the guy gets around. And you'd think in Afghanistan, they know who Babe Ruth is? Yes. So, it's really something else. The guy, many celebrities, regardless of what school or where they're from, their star will rise, and then eventually it's going to decline. That almost seems inevitable. But with Ruth, it seems his star continues to rise. And I think he might be unique that way. I think it was Mike Gibbons of the Babe Ruth Museum told me for a while they were saying with Michael Jordan, they would call somebody the Michael Jordan of this and the Michael Jordan of that. But he said eventually it just fell away. It didn't stick. But with Babe Ruth, it sticks, and it does. They, so-and-so is the Babe Ruth of this and the Babe Ruth of that. It means you're the best, and still, in use today.
Hey, Jerry.
Yeah.
Can you explain from a legal standpoint how the family maintains control and monetizes his image or persona?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, let me tell you that I'm not a lawyer. Okay. So, all right. So the Luminary Group is the company, and they're run by lawyers who have a background in sports, and they represent the Ruth family. for promotions, sponsorships, endorsements, commercials. Anytime there's a likeness of Ruth, it has to go through them. If there is something, you say corporate that's being done with Ruth, or an ad or whatever it is, or they put his name on something, there are monies paid to the family, and also to the Babe Ruth League, the Babe Ruth League, which is a not-for-profit. They do get a portion. The actual figures, I don't know exactly, but there are monies that accrue to them, and I can tell you that it is significant. It's significant, and it's a corporate thing. Pete Enfield, he's the president of the Luminary Group. I've had many talks with him, and he'll get into all the legal nitty-gritty of it. But you know, a couple of years ago, I guess it was 2018, I was at, we were doing a book signing with Tom Stevens and the grandson. And when Tom goes to Cooperstown, this is, I guess, induction weekend. This would be 2018, 2 years ago. And what he does, he goes along Main Street, all the streets, and he's looking for improper uses or illegal uses of Babe Ruth's name, image, or anything. And he makes note of it, and then they have to go through the company. And a lot of people, you know, his name is used a lot when they don't get any permission to use it. So there are monies that accrue. I think in 1995, the year of the centennial of Ruth's birth, in 1995, it was like $25–30 million in products sold with Babe Ruth over that year, but that figure is probably minuscule compared to what's being generated today. It's pretty big.
I have a couple more comments, if you don't mind, Jerry.
Yeah.
My first trip to Cooperstown was in like 77 or 78.
Right.
And my expectation was Ty Cobb was the best hitter ever, highest average, and Babe Ruth had the most home runs.
Right.
So I thought they would be like equally weighted.
Yeah.
As far as the displays up, they really hadn't upgraded Cooperstown at the time. You couldn't watch videos of anything, but
yeah,
it was pretty country. But they had like a 4x4 or 5x5 glass case with Ty Cobb stuff in it. Had his glove, had his shoes, and
yeah,
really not much. I saw that first, and then Babe Ruth had a wing.
Yeah,
it just had an entire right wing, just like 20 rooms, all about Babe Ruth. And I said, maybe he had a bigger impact than.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it's the personality of the guy. You know, I mean, there are two different types of ball players, needless to say. Ty Cobb may have been the best hitter of all time, but two different types of players, but even more so, two different types of personality. A lot of people did not like Ty Cobb. You know, I haven't met anybody who said they didn't like Babe Ruth. You know, even somebody who was in a fight with him in a bar, they loved him. So it's the kind of person that he was, and his personality was a very important part of what made him the icon that he became and that he still is today. I've been asked many times that if Babe Ruth had never been traded to the Yankees, would he be as big as he became? And my answer was basically, as a ball player, he probably would have been, but as an icon, as a marketing superstar, as a brand, probably not, because he went to New York. He went to New York at the right time, and he was the right person. And so, like I say, all those things kind of coalesced, and, you know, a perfect storm. But going back to Cobb, I think well, look at Lou Gehrig. I mean, Lou Gehrig was very quiet, reserved, humble, didn't like being interviewed. And, you know, they may have been the best tandem in baseball history, these two, and they could not have been more unalike. But it was the personality that Ruth had. People were drawn to him. You know, the Harold Lloyd thing I showed you, that video. I mean, he was just a natural and liked being in front of people. And, you know, he was very good at it.
Hey, Jerry, I had a question.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm asking now. Go ahead.
Do you think that Ruth's, one of the reasons he remains so popular is because he had such an extraordinary, unique relationship with America's children? And,
I think that's.
And do you think that you know, people just relate to him because he was such a unique, like in the history of American sports? I mean, how would you you know, characterize Ruth's relationship with kids compared to like today or something like that. And how
You mean to athletes today?
yeah.
Yeah.
And is that one of those unique qualities that keeps Ruth popularity?
Yeah, well, I mean, let me turn it around and ask you a question. What athlete is more beloved by kids in America than Babe Ruth? I don't know who it is, you know. Who's the most loved athlete, beloved athlete in American history? You may argue Muhammad Ali, but I would say it's probably Babe Ruth. Michael Jordan has been considered by many the best athlete of any sport, but again, he didn't have the personality that Babe Ruth did. And he kind of, I think, avoided getting involved in issues or things. Whereas, as Maxwell pointed out earlier about, you know, signing his name to that ad about Nazi Germany, doing stuff for the State Department during the war. Ruth did things like that, and all the charities, and like what he did with charities. People aren't even aware of how much of an impact he had on charities. He was the first celebrity philanthropist, and that's the kind of guy he was. So, yeah, with the kids, again, when you look at the scrapbooks, I mean, the photos of him with kids, it's unbelievable. I thought I knew a lot about Ruth before I went in there and I saw this, and I was blown away. It was just incredible. Everywhere he went, he would go visit hospitals and kids and so on. Here's another thing, by the way. A guy who was probably the leading sports autograph expert in the world told me that Babe Ruth signed his name, get this, 2 million times. And I said, how is that possible, 2 million times? And he said, well, if you go from, say, 1920 to when he went to the Yankees, right up to his death in 1948, he said everywhere he went, he was mobbed, even after he retired. And he did the math, and he said it would work out to 190, I think he said 194 signatures a day. And he said that was not unthinkable in terms of the way Ruth lived, and he was very accommodating. So according to this guy, Babe Ruth signed 2 million autographs, and there's probably 1 million autographs still out there in the public domain. And if they can be authenticated and validated, they're worth a lot of money. I asked Julia once, I said, did you ever get any signed baseballs from the Babe? She said, no, and it's a shame. She said, the only thing I ever got a signature on was a check, which I thought was kind of funny. But like I say, he was just a very accommodating guy. And I don't know if you could find a more accommodating athlete to this day. I think
maybe Ken Griffey Jr. in the 90s definitely built on that legacy of being able to convey baseball as a kid's game and the enjoyment of it and the pleasure.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. But I still don't think he's up there with Babe Ruth. I think Ruth is in his own league. And you know, I really do.
I think Griffey probably carried on the tradition that the Babe started.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Jerry, have you been to Hot Springs?
No, but I've heard about it, and with a home run shot and all that stuff. No, I haven't been there though.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I went over there in 2018, and they had a field there that's a warehouse or parking lot now.
Yeah,
they were able to take old aerial shots and find home plate, and it was St. Patrick's Day 1918. Ruth took his first try as an outfielder. He'd always been a pitcher.
Yeah.
And his first at bat, he hit it 573 feet into an alligator pond.
That's
the
right.
Alligator farm was built in 1905, and the pond's still there, and they got a big sign advertising, come see where Ruth's shot landed. 500.
That's right. I think
the Weyerhaeuser lot, they marked off home plate. It's asphalt, but the home plate is marked.
Yeah.
And I got to admit, it was still a thrill. 100-something years. It lacked one day of being 100 years to the date, because I was there the day before St. Patrick's, standing where Ruth stood. Yeah. And just looking at where the ball landed and doing a fake swing, you know, and just.
Well, didn't they have an event there 2 years ago for the 100th year? I think Stevens told me, Tom Stevens, I think they were there. They had some event.
They may have. I was there the day before, so I didn't see it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But if you hadn't been there, it's a pretty cool place to go, considering.
Well, it's on my bucket list when I will start traveling again, whenever that may be. So,
Okay, any more questions for Jerry?
I have one. Hey, Jerry, what or who did Babe hold in esteem himself?
he modeled his swing after Shoeless Joe Jackson. I know that. They said Jackson had the greatest swing, and Ruth modeled his swing after that, though he made some adjustments. And another thing about Jackson, again, that Julia told me, she told me that Babe Ruth knew Shoeless Joe Jackson very well. And Babe told her, again, this is according to what Julia told me. She said Babe told her that Shoeless Joe Jackson didn't know a damn thing about the fixing of the World Series. The guy couldn't read or write. He hit something like 375 in the World Series, and that he didn't know anything about what was going on. And I thought that was pretty cool because, of course, he was one of the 8 who got kicked out of baseball for life, right? But I remember her telling me that Babe told her that Shoeless Joe Jackson didn't know anything about the fixing of the World Series. And if you look at his stats, I mean, it kind of bears that out. But he modeled his swing after Jackson.
There's also a video about hot springs on the web that you can.
Yeah, I've seen that, yeah.
And he had a priest that used to hit him balls when he was in the orphanage. And the priest was like 6'8", and he had this big uppercut swing and swung left-handed.
Yeah, well, it was Brother Matthias at St. Mary's Industrial School.
Yes.
He was 6'6". Okay. He was 6'6", and he weighed about 250 pounds. And he's the guy who taught Babe Ruth how to play baseball. And I'm almost going to apologize when I tell you this. Brother Matthias was a Canadian. He was from Nova Scotia.
No way.
Yep, he was a Canadian. Yes, he was. So the man who taught Babe Ruth how to play baseball was from Canada. So there you go. But Babe Ruth called him, quote, the greatest man I have ever known. And he had a huge impact on Ruth. Yeah.
Well, Jerry, you should check out our last newsletter because we have a little article in there by someone who's since passed away about Babe Ruth and his effect on some of the kids back in the playing days.
Yeah. Oh, I'll have a look at that. Yeah.
Larry's still with us.
Yeah, I didn't know Larry had passed away.
No, he's still with us. He's still with us. He's about Larry Megan's.
Elder statesmen, let's say.
Okay.
Yeah, that good. Okay.
Yeah, well, my kids call me that too now, so, you know.
Okay, this has been terrific, Jerry. I mean, absolutely outstanding. Your recollection and your research has been just absolutely wonderful. And we can't thank you enough for joining us and being with us today or tonight. And
thank you, Bob.
It's been a pleasure. Very good.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure for me too.
Good, good. Okay, Mr. Thompson, let's go back to the survey, and then we cannot forget Mr. Maxwell Hates after a while. Incidentally, is Tony Cavender on tonight? Tony, you here? I guess not. Tony's looking for some writers to write in our newsletter, and we have a deadline coming up in January. So if you'd like, if you ever wanted to write an article about baseball, we're looking for some articles for our newsletter, and we're going into our 3rd edition. So please put that on your calendar to contribute. Okay, Joe.
Okay, I'll do this pretty quickly. Question number 1, what was the Astros' top moment for 2020? It was pretty close, but the ALCS Game 5 Correa walk-off win barely beat the Astros, beat the A's to clinch the ALDS. So those were the vote getters. Something else, those of you who picked something else, very quickly, can you think of something else real fast? Those of you who may have said something else.
Joe, I said something else. Just the idea they actually got a season in was pretty good.
Okay. All right. All right. I actually thought the signing of Dusty Baker might have been a top moment, considering everything they had to deal with coming into the season. And, you know, just a thought. Who's the Astros' biggest rival? The A's. going away.
That's sad.
Well, the Rangers are not that far behind, but
Did
Yeah,
Billy Bean leave?
what's that?
Billy Bean leave the A's?
I don't know. I don't think so.
He's thinking about it. You know, that's sad though. The A's have to be the biggest rival.
Do you think that's the Mike Fiers effect, Greg?
I maybe, but I still, it's been how many years now, and I still have trouble with the American League West. I mean, it's just put us in the, if I don't, even it's not American League as much as it's the West. You know,
I still hate the
Central.
Dodgers.
That's why I said. That's why I said the Dodgers. 1980,
Yeah.
1981.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Did the Astros re-sign Correa? Going away, yes.
Yeah, especially if they're not taking Springer.
A few people said trade him. Y'all want to comment? Or no?
He breaks down too much. He's too injury prone.
Okay.
That's a good
Well,
point.
Hate him if he
He-
gets injured again.
He wasn't this year, but I can see people saying that, but at the same token, this club's going to have to start spending some money on some of their own guys at some point if they're going to stay relevant.
Yeah, I think he's a big resign. I mean, he showed, at least me, that he's the leader of the team now. I mean, standing up for everybody, just and saying stuff and backing it up on the field. I mean, he really kind of became the face of the club, I think, this year.
I think we take him for granted almost, but when you rank shortstops, all around shortstops in baseball, he's right there at the top.
Yeah.
Offense and defense, and maybe we take him for granted because we know all the negatives. It's sort of like what's going on with the Rockets and Harden.
Oh,
Take for granted really how good he is because of the negatives that are coming out about whether or not he really wants to be here. But he really is a super player, and wherever he plays, he will be one. So
Yeah, but we got Altuve and Bregman too, so you can't say he's the number one big guy.
I
some-
think
we
I
got
can.
some big guys.
I think he's got more raw talent than any of them. So we'll just see.
He's taller.
Will Jordan be back for 2021? I had a feeling this would be yes, but I put he better be. And a couple of you, you probably feel the same way I do. He better be.
Why did you put that question in there? I mean, is there a big doubt about his knees or what?
I was looking for a fourth question, and I didn't want to take up.
Yeah, it wasn't a very good question. I like the first three. They were excellent.
Honestly, I just threw that in at the last second. All right, Bob, go ahead. That's all I got.
Okay. Something for everybody to think about is SABR has said that their National Day of Baseball will be January 30th. We've always gone to the Astros Fan Fest for our SABR Day in America. Won't be a fan fest. So you have some ideas about what we might do to celebrate that event on the 30th of January? Let us know. Because right now we're kind of out of ideas for that particular day. Okay, now we're up to Mr. Maxwell Cates, who's going to talk to us about SABR 44. And most of us attended SABR 44. So Maxwell, you're up.
All right, thank you very much. Good to see everybody again. Bob, Joe, Jerry, good, nice presentation. As Bob mentioned, today's trivia contest is all about the 44th Annual SABR Convention, which was held in Houston. Before we get to it, I'd like to take 30 seconds to read a letter that I have here from one of the people who spoke at the convention. Maxwell, thank you for your interest in my book. Paul and I had fun writing it. Merle Harmon was a good friend of mine. He was a real pro and a great guy. My best to you and yours, Eddie Robinson. Turns 100 tomorrow.
Worth its weight in gold.
And Eddie Robinson's the answer to one of the questions today. And if you get that question, double points on that question. All right, so let's get started. The first question. Delegates at SABR 44 received a copy of the brand new book entitled Houston Baseball, The Early Years. Name the former Houston Buffs pitcher, position player, and manager whose images figured prominently on the cover illustration? 3 points. Name the pitcher, the position player, and the manager without going and picking it off the shelf. I presume we all have the book.
If you don't have the book, I have a way you can pick it up real cheap.
I had the book, but I never knew who those people were.
I know better than that, Mike.
Are we ready for the next question?
Yep.
April 1991. Nolan Ryan and Reed Ryan famously faced each other in a preseason exhibition game. For which two Texas-based teams were the Ryans pitching? For 2 points, what teams were Nolan Ryan and Reed Ryan pitching for in 1991?
Okay.
Next one. Family Feud asked 100 people to name the most despicable public figure of the 20th century. Not surprisingly, Adolf Hitler finished first. Which subject of a Mickey Herskowitz biography finished fourth for 1 point?
Ooh.
Fourth most despicable person of the 20th century, and Mickey Herskowitz wrote a book about this person. Next question.
Okay.
On the Thursday night of the convention, the Sugarland Skeeters hosted the Bridgeport Bluefish. Which two all-star caliber players of the 1980s managed the two teams? Ready for question number 5?
Go for it.
All right. The next 3 questions are all about research presentations at the SABR convention. First one, what 3 graduates of the Kansas City Royals Baseball Academy later played in the major leagues? For 3 points. Three graduates of the Kansas City Royals Baseball Academy who played in the major leagues. Number 6. What pitcher on the Corpus Christi Seagulls of the Gulf States League went on to become a highly successful pitching coach for the Atlanta Braves? And he used to do this in the dugout all the time.
Got it.
Number 7. What Triple Crown winner played for the famed 1931 Houston Buffs? Number 8. What 2 former Blue Jays catchers spoke at the SABR convention? 2 former Blue Jay catchers who spoke at the convention.
How many points is that worth?
That
You know
is
that
worth,
one.
that's worth 2 points. 2 points. Number 9. 3 points. On the Saturday morning, there was a player panel which I describe as old Yankees telling jokes. Name the 3 former Yankee players who participated in the panel. 3 Yankees who spoke on the Saturday morning of the convention.
I've already mentioned 2 of their names early in the day.
We have. Here's a name we haven't mentioned already. The daughter of which Yankees manager spoke at the convention? For 2 points, name both the father and the daughter. Number 11. Whose jersey was distributed to fans as a promotion at the SABR game between the Astros and the Toronto Blue Jays? You were at that game. Whose jersey did they give you on the way in?
Actually, on the way out.
Number 12. True or false? At the SABR game, we saw A, the game with the roof open, B, a knuckleball pitcher, C, an inside the park home run, and D, a runner thrown out at home plate.
How many points?
1.
Like you on the way?
1.
Got a 50-50 shot to get that one right.
Was that one question or 4?
That was one question, Mark.
These are the type of questions I like.
Hold it. Are we supposed to pick one of those, or are we supposed to say
all 4. It's
we're supposed to say true or false?
True or false for the aggregate.
Oh, run through the list.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
All right. Okay.
Either all are true or all are false, right? Or something.
Some of them.
I got it.
We saw the game with the roof open, a knuckleball pitcher, an inside the park home run, and a runner thrown out at home plate.
True or false, right?
True or false?
Okay.
And then the last regulation question. Name the for two points. Name the only 2 current major league markets which have yet to host a SABR convention.
Ooh.
2 cities with Major League Baseball teams today have never hosted the conventions. Which ones?
Is one of them Canadian?
No. Toronto had 2 of them, 1981 and 2005.
I should have known.
And the bonus, which has nothing to do with the Houston convention. Who was Miller Huggins' law professor? And what baseball player was named after his law professor? Who was Miller Huggins' law professor? Bearing in mind that Miller Huggins is from Cincinnati. And what baseball player was named after this law professor? While you're finishing your answers, here's a program from the convention, if anybody. Are we ready to go to answers, Bob?
Yes, sir.
All right. The first one, Houston baseball, the early years. Chick Hafey, Dizzy Dean, and Johnny Keane.
If you get 1, do you get anything?
Yep. If you get 1, you get 1 point. All right. Number 2. The 2 Texas-based teams that the Ryans were pitching for. Does anybody want to take a stab at this?
Astros and Rangers?
Rangers is one of them.
TCU.
TCU is the other.
Said 2 major league teams.
No, I said what 2 Texas-based teams?
That's wrong.
I videotaped that game.
It was UT. This was before Reed had transferred to TCU. It was University of Texas.
It was University of Texas.
Yeah, and
I got
Rangers.
that. Yeah.
And here's a bonus on this,
all right.
which you don't have. Who interviewed them both after the game? No, it wasn't me. Who interviewed them both after the game on television?
Anita Martini.
It was the third. It was the second Ryan son. He was just a kid. He interviewed them both. Yeah.
That was close.
Reese. Yeah.
Now the Family Feud question. Which subject of a Mickey Herskowitz biography finished 4th on the list of most despicable people of the 20th century? And here's a clue.
Steinbrenner. Oh, Howard Cosell.
That's right.
Howard Cosell.
If you got the first name right, do you get anything?
Yes. We'll give it to you.
Who could have Howard who?
Howard Hughes.
Howard.
It was
I didn't
Howard
think he-
something.
I didn't think he wrote one about Nixon. Okay.
What the two 1980s All-Star caliber players who managed the Skeeters and the Bridgeport Bluefish?
Jerry Gaetti.
Gaetti's correct.
Was Butch Hobson the other one?
Nope.
Marky Lyle.
Not first
I
baseman.
know Tomooka pitched.
What team did he play for?
Blue Jays.
I don't know. I don't know.
Willie Upshaw.
Oh, okay.
Willie Upshaw. What 3 graduates of the Kansas City Royals Baseball Academy later played in the major leagues?
I only know Frank White.
Frank White's correct. He's one of them.
Willie Wilson.
Not Willie Wilson.
George Brett. Then I
I'll give you
got
a clue.
one.
They both have the same last name.
Ken Brett.
Ken Brett.
No.
UL Washington.
UL Washington's correct.
Oh, wow.
And if you guessed UL, we'll give you the other one as a bonus.
Ron Washington.
Ron Washington's the other one.
They're related?
No,
Nope.
but that's correct. Fact checked with the Kansas City Historical Baseball Society. The 2 Washingtons and Frank White are the only graduates of the academy to make the major leagues.
That's true.
Were they all at the convention, or was there a?
There was a presentation about that at the convention.
Oh,
What pitcher on the Corpus Christi Seagulls went on to become a highly successful pitching coach for the Atlanta Braves?
Leo Mazzoni.
Leo Mazzoni's correct. Well done.
his wife's name is Greg.
Is that right?
Yeah. Sat with her at a game.
Which Triple Crown winner played for the famed 1931 Houston Buffs?
Medwick.
Medwick's correct. The 3 Yankees who participated in Old Yankees Telling Jokes.
You skipped the 2
8.
catchers.
You skipped the
2 catchers. For
Oh, the 2 catchers.
Alan Ashby and somebody.
Alan Ashby's correct.
Buck Martinez.
Buck Martinez is correct.
Good. I got one of those.
That's good.
Now the old Yankees Telling Jokes. Who were the 3 players?
I'm going with Bob Watson, Bobby Brown, and Eddie Robbins.
I'm going with you're right, and you're right.
All right.
And what if anybody guessed Eddie Robinson for that one? Whatever points you got, double it.
At this point?
So you get 6 points for that question, Mike.
Oh, okay.
So what is it? How many points is that question worth normally?
It's normally worth 3 points, but if you guessed Eddie Robinson, take your score for that question and double it.
Wow.
I think Mike
So
just
each one of those
flinched.
is worth 3 points?
Pardon me?
Each name is worth 3 points?
No, each name's worth 1 point.
Okay, I'm confused.
He got all 3 of them, so he gets to double it.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
right.
you have to get all 3.
No, you get
Double
1
it.
is 1 point, 2 is 2 points, and 3 is 3 points.
Yes, but then you doubled.
You
said
double if one of them you guessed was Eddie Robinson.
Yeah.
Okay, so
6.
if you got 2 of them right and one was Eddie Robinson, you got 4 points.
That's right.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, fortunately, I met all 3 of those guys selling silent auctions.
That is probably
That was
clinched
nice.
to being next month's trivia guy, probably so.
And the
How many
daughter of
points was
which
Joe
Yankee
Medwick
manager
worth?
spoke at the convention.
Say what?
How many
The
points
daughter
is
of which
Joe-
Yankees manager spoke at the convention.
Dick Hauser.
Correct. And what was his daughter's name?
I have to look it up.
Jana. Throw out a bonus question for everybody. Where did Dick Hauser manage his last game?
Toronto.
No.
Kansas City.
Kansas
Nope.
City.
Give you a clue. I'm probably the only one here who doesn't live there.
Houston.
That's right. 1986 All-Star game.
That's right.
That was his last game. Whose jersey was distributed to fans as a promotion at the Sabre game?
Andrew Pettit.
Correct.
That is right.
Who?
Andy Pettit.
Andy Pettit. I have two of them.
Two jerseys.
All
They
right.
gave them
still
to
have
us when we
mine.
left the Sabre presentation there at Union Square. They handed to them as we walked out after the presentation.
Right.
All right. True or false? At the Sabre game, we saw the game with the roof open, a knuckleball pitcher, an inside the park home run, and a runner thrown out at the plate. How many say true?
The which?
How many say false?
The what? You said there were 4 different answers. I know a runner got thrown out the plate.
If both of them are technically correct, and I'll tell you why.
I mean, inside the park homer. We saw
The
that.
inside the park home run was thrown out at the plate, but it was overturned. So if you said true, if you said false, you get it.
Oh, okay, you get that one either
Oh,
way.
wait a minute. Now the roof was open.
Yes, it
Yes,
was.
it was.
Well, they
And
were all
Harvey Dickey was
true.
the starting pitcher.
That I remember because it was August. Come on.
Yes. August
When has the
3rd.
roof been open in August?
Can anybody remember the player who hit the inside the park home run?
I'll do that.
It was an Astro.
Was?
John Singleton.
That's right.
Oh, really?
I have a funny story behind that, but I'll tell that later.
Well, who can
All right.
forget John Singleton?
The only 2 current major league markets which have yet to host a Sabre convention.
Tampa Bay.
That's one.
Texas.
Nope, they had it in 94.
Oh, okay.
Miami.
Miami had it in 2016. Herb was there.
Seattle.
Seattle was 2006.
Oh, I don't know. Detroit.
Detroit's
Yeah.
correct.
Oh, Detroit.
The
I
Sabre
didn't get
convention has
Detroit.
never gone to Detroit.
Hey, Maxwell, on the 4-part thing, is that just a 1-point question?
1 point question.
Okay, so it was the open roof. What was the second part of that?
Knuckleball pitcher.
Who was that? Because I didn't
Dickey.
know. Who?
R.A. Dickey.
All right,
R.A. Dickey.
Oh, okay. There's Mets then. Okay.
And then the bonus question, does anybody know the name of Miller Huggins' law professor?
John Rose.
Nope, more famous than that.
Grover Cleveland.
You're in the right ballpark.
William Howard Taft.
William Howard Taft's correct.
Whoa, Mike.
And what baseball player was named after William Howard Taft?
Willie Mays.
Correct. Willie Howard Mays.
Did they do that on purpose, though?
That's hard to believe.
That's not a fact. That's not a fact.
It's in James Hirsch's book.
Who can believe James Hirsch? Where's he from?
I don't know. I was on a plane to Vienna when I was reading it.
Oh.
Okay, so let's add up the points.
All right, so you get 1 for that 4-parter.
1 for the 4-pointer.
Even if you just get one of them right?
Both outcomes were right, so if you answered it, you get it.
Is that true? You get it.
Which one is that?
What
So
happened?
everybody got number 12 right.
Everybody got number 12 right. We saw the
Okay.
runner was thrown out at home plate, but it was overturned.
I didn't get R.A. Dickey.
Well,
It was true.
Okay, how many points are there?
all right. Does anybody have 10 points?
I don't know how.
I do.
I do.
Does anybody
I do.
have 15?
I do.
Does anybody have 20?
I don't.
I do.
I had 15.
16. 16.
I got it.
Bob has 16?
Yeah.
I guess Bob's the winner then.
Oh,
I didn't know any of the guys on the cover of the book.
You probably have the book.
I do, but I meant to ask Bob one day, who are those people on the cover? I was thinking about that the other day. I was looking at it.
And I designed it. I got one of them wrong.
And you published the book. You edited the book.
Name is on the front cover of the book. Who's at the meeting?
Well, I don't know why. I had the manager, I could picture his, him pointing, and I don't know why I put Fred Hutchison instead of Johnny Keene. So go figure.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Maxwell, nice job as usual.
How many did you get, Greg?
I got 7.
I thought you had your hand up at 15.
No, I was pointing at you.
Oh.
I thought you were going to be the winner. On my screen, you were this direction. You're 2 across.
What about? There must have been some other people who had more points. I mean, come on.
No, Bob, you win. About time you won one.
Yeah, I know.
I've been a SABR over 10 years and you never won.
I was going to say he's been running. He ran the darn convention. He ought to know everything about it.
Yeah. I'm sorry. How many did you get anyway? About 30?
19.
You coordinated everything.
Okay.
It'd be like you edited the book and you didn't get all the answers of the people on the cover.
I'll tell you. The reason I got it is because I got the big 6 points at one time on that one. Yankees speakers.
I was waiting for the Hal Smith question, Greg.
Okay, guys, our next and gals, because I know there's one. I know Marcia's on here. Our next meeting will be next year. As I've told several people, this has been a very difficult year in many ways, but we went from A to Z. Our chapter went from A to Z. We started with arbitration, and we ended with Zoom. So I guess that's A to Z. We're meeting on the 18th, and we have 2 speakers lined up. One will be Chris Chestnut as a presentation, and the other will be from Scott Bush, who is the CEO of SABR. And we need another speaker for that day. So we did some brainstorming the other day. We got some suspects. I won't say they're prospects, but they're suspects. So we'll see what we can do.
What's the date?
It is, I'm usually wrong, but it's the 18th of January, 2021. Okay. Want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Have a blessed holiday season and with you and your family, and we'll see you next year. Take care.
And you, Bob.
Have a good holiday, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Have a good one. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
We should have asked to sing a song, 12 Days of Christmas. That would have been funny.
Too late. There's only 11 days left, Joe. So
Okay, 11 days.
They don't start till Christmas.
Well, we had a family get together last night, and they sang 12 Days of Christmas over Zoom, so that was hilarious. All right.
And it's good to see the people that mostly stayed awake all night still with us here.
There's Wesley. I hadn't seen him all night.
I was
Right
scanning.
here.
I was scanning at one point, and it looked like we had some of President of the Texans' wife's, interest by some people who dozed off. But we had a pretty good number. And again, a happy holidays for everybody. And let's just hope that all the baseball news between now and then, next month is good, and that everybody starts getting shots, and we start having this COVID situation clear up a little bit more than it is now. That's for sure.
I hope you're right, Greg. I hope you're right.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
take care, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah, I think Tal's still on there. Well, it's you and me, Joe, and Tal.
I think Tal's doing something.
Yeah. Okay. Appreciate your help as always.
No problem, sir. And
Gary did a nice job tonight, didn't he?
yes, he did. He did a great job.
He knows his stuff.
Happy holidays, Tal. We saw him for a second. He left. He sure does.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.